Hi, I'm Eric Nearstead, and welcome back to night 2 of our reading of A Child Shall Lead from my short story collection, Spider Stories, Tales of the Silent Pantheon. Let's resume, shall we? Every door of the home was locked, every window shut, and every blind pulled down. Yet there was still light in the apartment above, where the owner lived. It lit the closed blinds and the windows there, a small flicker of warmth against the bitter cold outside. Some might see it as an image of hope. Others might be reminded of a little girl and her lone light on a Christmas written about long ago. Yet this light was not lit to give comfort, nor was the owner of this home just as simple to understand as Little Match Girl. His name was Mustafa Barakat. His name was Anubis. And in times long past, in a land far away and warm, he had been a god. And he still was. Mustafa sat in his easy chair, the fabric green and plush and comfortable, a fire glowing nearby. It lit his tan skin and highlighted the crevices in his face. There was age there, to be sure, but his eyes, there was still life and vigor in them, even for a god of the dead. They moved along the book he held, glancing at each word quickly as he sipped from his wine glass. It was how he spent many nights, alone and comfortable with the words of old. This night was no different. Mustafa turned the page, absorbing the story. The book itself was well worn. The pages were slightly yellowed, and the cover had a few indentations from the grip of its owner. Yet Mustafa held it dearly, as he had for more than 10 years. True, he had read of stories of far greater age, written beyond the ages that modern man had even begun to discover in Egypt. He often wondered what a museum would do if he was to even donate a single piece of his literature. Even the terrible ones, such as that one story the young pharaoh had written. By Ra above. That man had had many gifts, but clearly Thoth had not blessed him with the skill of the written word. Yet today, Mustafa could easily make thousands, perhaps even millions from it, if he so desired. Thankfully, there was still much worthy literature to come from the land of Mustafa's birth. Beyond his time there, stories had continued to grow and take root, including the one he read now. He had discovered it some time ago, in a bookstore in the city that was no longer there. Mustafa had already known the name of Baha Tahir, so a new story to him was a boon to his day. The Jackal God had bought it immediately and began reading it that very night. True, the work was not as clear as the original Arabic, but still it had grabbed him. It took Mustafa back to the Egypt, not his own, but one he still remembered. The time of British rule had been a struggle for Mustafa, to see his people endure the yoke of foreign rulers. He had hoped for his people's freedom to come. Unlike the times of long ago, there was little he could do to help them. He was a symbol of the old world, with no place and no role in the one that had taken his place. And so he read the tale of Mahamud, the disgraced officer, and his Irish wife, and he felt those days again, in all their struggle and their hardships. He had finished it within a week, and then placed it among his literature below. Since then, he had removed Sunset Oasis only once each year, when the cold winds blew the hardest and the lights and cheer gleamed from every window. As he thought of the outside world, Mustafa placed the book down and went to his window. He withdrew the blinds and looked out upon the streets. Lights of all colors gleamed from the other buildings, and he could hear songs and caroling from the streets below. They were sung in voices of joy and happiness, of goodwill and hope. Mustafa shut the blinds and walked back to his chair. It was the same every year. The joy that pervaded the air, the happiness of people celebrating something that seemed to them eternal and full of hope. Mustafa did not begrudge them their happiness, nor did he begrudge the source of their praise. He had respected the words of the sun since he had begun speaking them in Jerusalem and long beyond. A holy day for his birth was deserved. And even if the people did find themselves lost in the commercialism of the holiday, still did many of them feel and perform the goodwill that the sun had spoken of so many times. It was indeed a good time of year, and a day that could bring out the best in the world. Yet Mustafa could not take part in it. Even if he did not hate the holiday, the emotions it brought up were empty to him. For this was a day that celebrated the family of man, the brotherhood of those that had birthed gods all over the world within their hearts. Mustafa had seen the gods of Egypt fade in history, their blood absorbed by the sands. He alone stood to preserve their memory, to remember that which they had been. It was a burden that weighed on him much of the time, but even more so now. True, Horace had been returned to the land of the living, but he was not truly the same. He had not lived through the centuries alone, and even now he was not unaltered, while his jackal cousin still held all of the memories of the past. Mustafa drank more of his wine as he thought of the many out there celebrating with their families, enjoying food and drink and merriment. He wished them well, but yet a sliver of envy and perhaps even of hate pierced his heart. Even if he had been able to give praise to the Son of Yahweh, he had no others to share it with, no one with whom he could know joy and happiness. That is not so, and you know it. Mustafa sighed and looked to the window again. Horace was far away now, with his new family, and Mustafa did not want to intrude upon their traditions. And he knew the others would be at the bar now, gathered to enjoy their yearly meal. Each time they invited him to dine with them, to receive their tribute as he gave his own. And each time he had refused. It was not out of anger or resentment, but a simple truth. Mustafa cared for the others. He would fight alongside them, for them, and he considered them to be honorable beings. Even Coyote, though nothing short of Amit's bite would drag that out of him. Yet despite all this, his true family was dead. And to celebrate in such a way with others, even others such as those, it would be a betrayal. And so Anubis remained alone. The alleys were a blur as he ran, the lights nothing but streaks of color as he flew across the pavement. He ran as fast as his legs would carry him, yet still he heard the clanking behind him, the clops instead of footsteps, and the terrible smell of burnt chestnuts. With each step he took, the sounds and smells grew louder and closer. Soon it would be upon him, and then he ran even faster, looking for somewhere, anywhere, where he could avoid what was chasing him. The alleys ended, spilling him out into a street. He barely stopped before he stepped off the sidewalk, desperate for some place he could... There! It loomed in front of him, with great columns in the doorway. A huge place, one that had to have someone important inside, someone that could help him. He looked quickly from side to side and then ran across, just avoiding the cars that came screaming behind him. His feet touched the sidewalk on the other side, and he ran for the door as the smell of fresh wood filled his nostrils. Thud! 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 Mustafa looked up from his book again, towards the door. He sighed and placed the book down across the arm of the chair, then rose to his feet. He was not often called upon to work on this day, but it was not impossible. Sadly, even the sun could not keep all of his followers from the hands of death. Mustafa went to the door, ready to perform the duties given to him centuries ago. As he walked through the apartment, the thuds still coming, he wondered what lay before him. A grandparent passing out at dinner? An accident with a family going home? Could it even be others come to spread the word of the sun on his doorstep? Or perhaps even carolers? Mustafa hoped for the last one as he walked down the stairs to his funeral home. They were far less annoying than those spreading the word of their god. Perhaps they would even perform the first Noel. It was a good melody, if nothing else. Mustafa reached for the door, put on his most professional face, and turned the knob. Opening it wide, he looked out and said, "How can I help?" He did not get to finish, as a small form ran past him into the home. Mustafa whirled around to see just what had come to his doorstep. As he looked, he saw that his invader was dressed in a red jacket, gloves, a giant's wool cap, jeans, and thick boots. He also looked to be about 10 years old, as he looked at Mustafa with panic in his blue eyes. "Close the door!" "What is this?" the jackal asked. "Who are you and what are you?" "Close the door! Hurry!" "Why? What's out there?" "That thing! It's after me! Don't let it in!" "Believe me, nothing will come to this place," Mustafa said. "This is a house of death." The boy's eyes widened further, and Mustafa realized what he had said. He spoke again, more calmly, trying to ease the boy's pain. "This is the funeral home. Those that come here are usually dead already." "So what are you doing here on Christmas?" "I own this place, and I live upstairs," Mustafa answered. "Now what about you? What are you doing out here on such a night?" "Please, mister, get the door first. It's still out there." Mustafa nodded and turned to close the door. As he did, he took a breath of the night air. It seemed normal, with only the usual smells of New York around them. Clink, 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 clink. Mustafa's ears perked as he heard that sound. He tried to focus on it, but something about the noise was jangly and unnerving. almost sounded like a bell, but one covered in rust and grime, its sweet sounds marred by time. Clink, 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 clink. Oh, dear, not that one, Mustafa muttered. Sour as it was, he could still recognize the melody of jingle bells. Mustafa started to move outside, but he heard the boy's panicked breathing increase. Clearly, something had frightened the boy. If the bells were any indication, it was not something filled with the spirit of the season. The jackal closed the door behind him and locked it. As the door shut, the bells jingled their sour, rusted melody once again, as a figure looked on from the top of the building across the street. It seemed to be dressed in a dark brown fur coat, with rusty bells tied to the front. Yet there were no buttons, and the fur was no coat. The figure looked upon the funeral home, then adjusted the bundle on its back, and rose up on its cloven feet. Its mouth split in a horrid grin of pointy teeth and long tongue, as its eyes gleamed underneath the curled horns on its head. To be continued.